Yeah, we're live. It is. I'm trying to make up from last time. So it's 6:53. So we're here a little bit early, which is awesome. Tonight we're going to talk about an interesting comment or message that I got from one of the viewers. And this is fantastic. I love getting this kind of information from people because, especially in this case, it gives me a two-tiered approach to the comment because we'll talk about both what was said and kind of the reasoning behind why he said what he said, and both of them are very interesting because it's really good stuff. So I can't remember his name, but whoever you are, please, I thank you for making the comment about this. And basically his question was, he was discussing whether or not he should get, like, what size injectors he should get, and should he flow the injectors, which is, all of these are great questions. So, we've covered injector sizing. What size injector should I get for my power combination? We've gone over that. So you size the injector, obviously, for the power output, and I've given you the formula. If you have an NA V8 motor and you multiply the flow rate of the injector, for instance, if it's 50 pounds an hour times 16, that will tell you how much power it can support, and it's going to be less under boost and things like that. We've kind of gone over all that. But his points were interesting because it went even further than that. So, and this is what we're going to get into. We're going to talk about airflow distribution in the manifolds, and then also fuel distribution in the fuel rail, particularly of the factory LS intake manifolds and fuel rail. So his question was, and his comments were, okay, well, if I get these injectors and then I have them flowed, should I stick the injectors that flow more, assuming that they're not all the same? Ideally, I think I would want them to be all the same. But if we get injectors and flow them, the ones that flow maybe a little bit more, should I put those in cylinders 7 and 8? And so I'm like, why would you do that? Well, because cylinder 7 and 8, as we know, those are the always are, and I think that it was 7 and 8. So if you guys know, about this internet, I call it a myth only because I haven't seen anybody prove it to me as actual fact. And I don't care one way or the other whether it is or it isn't. I just want somebody to step up with actual data that shows me that this always happens. So on the LS motors, apparently people tend to think that there's a common intake manifold or a common cylinder that keeps blowing up because of the things that we're going to discuss here. So his point was that, okay, if I have an overabundance of flow in that cylinder, and that's the one that's going to be lean, I should put the injector that flows a little bit more in that one. And so we need to talk about that. So let's talk about the fact that you first of all would need to make sure that all the cylinders are getting the same pulse width and all that. You're not tuning them individually. So if they're all just getting the same thing and you have one that flows a little bit more, you could give it a little more fuel. But my question to him was, how do you know that cylinder needs more fuel? My question is, as always with everything, is have you tested it? Have you run? For me, it would be difficult to say that this cylinder flows more without having some sort of air turbine on an individual cylinder air turbine. You can extrapolate that from, okay, this cylinder is leaner if we do 8 individual O2s in a long tube header situation, so that we can go, okay, that cylinder for whatever reason is leaner than the others. And again, my question was, okay, well, have you done the test with the manifold that you have showing that that is the problem? Well, no, they all are. All these LSs are like this. I'm like, well, right off the bat, that's a warning flag for me. You can't say all of them because all of them are not. You have a variety of different intake manifolds where, so we'll talk about one of the theories. One of the theories is with the LS intake manifold that all the air rushes in and slams against the back wall and overfeeds one of the cylinders. That's an argument used for lots of different kinds of manifolds. But here again, and for me, it's not about like I'm trying to disprove this or prove it. I just want the information. But there's no way that can be universally true of all LS intake manifolds. If for no other reason than all of the factory LS intake manifolds are not the same. You have similarities between the LS6 and the LS2 and the LS3 and the LS1. They flow differently and make different power, but the design is at least somewhat similar. But the big problem are the truck manifolds. So the truck manifold is dramatically different. So let's say, and this is something that I disagree with right off the bat, though, let's say that the air is rushing in and hitting that back wall and overfilling the back two cylinders. That doesn't really happen on an NA motor because the air is not being forced in and hitting the back wall and slamming against the back wall as a big column. Guys, picture a big column of like a squirt gun tube of water going in there, hitting and filling. On a forced induction application, I could see that argument being made, but an NA motor, that's not what happens. The air is being drawn in from the downward moving piston. It's grabbing air from the common plenum, and then the common plenum gets air fed to it from in front of the throttle body. That's how that works. So we can have a big discussion on whether that's happening or not. But let's say that I suspend disbelief and say, okay, you're getting overfilling of the cylinders from that. The problem is that you can't have that happen on all LS motors, even if we eliminate all of the aftermarket intake manifolds like single planes and dual planes and all kinds of things that would just totally negate that. Even the factory truck manifold totally negates that. Because if you've ever seen the inside, I was hoping to have on my thumbnail, I was hoping to have the cutaway view, but I couldn't find it in time to get it up for the video to get prepared for this. But I have, and I posted it before. I have a cutaway of a truck manifold. So I just cut it right in half with a bandsaw. So you look at the inside, and on that particular manifold, and I think that some of the other truck manifolds are also like that. The truck manifold doesn't have just a big open plenum. So air can't just go rush in and hit the back wall and go into the back cylinders. On the truck, air would rush in and hit a big common tube that's sealed at the end and then open on the side of that. so imagine a tube that's capped and then has an opening on the side, and the air has to go in straight to the tube, hits the back wall, has nowhere to go, and then has to like spill out over the side and then go into a second common plenum and then go into all and find its way individually to where all the runners are, where the openings and all the runners are. And so that's not possible. Well, that's what I'm saying. At least with the truck manifold, the description that they're giving for how cylinders 7 and or 8 are overfilled with air, that can't happen. It can't even happen under boost, not with the truck manifold. That's not possible. So theory number 2 for this that I've been given is the fuel rail. So the theory number 2 is that the fuel rail, those are the last cylinders effectively. This is the way it's been described to me. I don't see that in the design of a factory fuel rail. Perhaps you could see that in a single feed that's looping all the way around, where the last one to get the fuel maybe the one that has the lowest pressure. But again, we're going to talk about what I would want to see before I would say, oh yeah, that's absolutely it. But if you look at the truck manifold and then you look at the truck fuel rail and other factory fuel rails, you'll see that they don't do that. And so at the very least, again, what I would want to see is, okay, those cylinders always go out because those are the last ones to get fuel. Okay. Let's say that with whatever fuel system you have, that is the case. Here's what I would want to see, and here's what I never see. When people tell me these things about the airflow, they never have 802s. They never show me that, hey, when we blew this motor up, this thing was 3 or 4 or 5 or 8%, whatever the number is, percent leaner on that cylinder because it had too much airflow. That would be great data. That would be fantastic. Instead of all LSs blow up like this. That's not enough. That's not enough information. I crave more information. And then the same thing with the fuel. So if you want to figure out whether or not you have fuel starvation in one cylinder caused by a fuel rail design, what you have to do is put pressure taps along the fuel rail. And so then you have to take a look and data log all that and go, hey, look, the fuel going into the fuel rail when it first hits the fuel rail is at 58 PSI. And at here, it's this pressure and 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 this pressure. And then you look at it and go, oh, okay, either yes, it's 58 going in, and by the time it gets over to number 7 or 8, we're hoping so that we have some correlation. By the time it gets over there, it's down to 57.9 or 49 or whatever the number is. You'd want to see a big change for there to actually be something to be concerned about with fuel flow, but it's probably, honestly, it's probably not going to happen. Having taken pressure taps in fuel rails because we were trying to figure this out, even factory ones, all kinds of different stuff. The guys over at Kenny Bell, I did a bunch of stuff with them, and we took a look at all this because there was a big concern about how much fuel flow a stock fuel system would flow, because they're usually fairly small from the factory, because they're only sized to run the kind of power output that they're going to run. So, the thinking is that, well, it'll only support this much. If you put a big pump on it and force the fuel through, it's amazing how little pressure drop we had when we were doing the testing, including in the fuel rails. And we've made lots more power than we should have through factory fuel rails, only because we didn't have another fuel rail and we had to try to do the test. I probably wouldn't recommend that, but we've done that before. But in any case, deciding whether or not that cylinder or those cylinders are getting lean based on the design of the fuel rail, you'd have to have that data. And nobody ever comes up to me and says, hey, look, Richard, here's why it did it, and here's the data to support that. When we ran this, we have a dedicated, either a deadhead system or a return system. And then we have, and on a return system, you might have less pressure differential between them at any given point, because it's all going out first before it's being regulated. So, but I would want to see that data. Okay, yeah, we have 3 pounds of pressure drop in one of the cylinders. Okay, well, that, if you're right on the edge and you're trying to, get every last bit out of it, and everything is at 11.9, and this one maybe is at 12.2, and that's the one that broke or whatever, and you can try to pinpoint that with fuel pressure, that might be okay. But the discussion that I had with the gentleman who was asking this obviously had none of this data. He just had, this is what the internet says, so this obviously has to be true. So now I'm taking steps to combat that. So the final thing to discuss here, because I don't think that, at least with the data that I was provided, I'm not saying that doesn't happen. Maybe it does, but I would want to see more information to tell me what the cause of that is. Maybe it's a temperature related thing. Maybe it's a tune related thing. There are lots of things that you could look at, that I would want to look at before I would determine. First of all, I know that all of them don't do it, because that's not, as soon as you say all, you just have to find one thing that doesn't, and then all of a sudden the all thing is not accurate. So very rarely do I try to use that description. And on the LS stuff, I know just from what we were talking about, we have different fuel rail designs and we have different intake manifold designs. So neither one of those things could be causing what they're describing on all of these motors. It's not possible. So there could be something else. These could be isolated incidents. Maybe this is something like the 5-liter Ford always breaking, the block's always breaking. People argue about that all the time. Does it do it just because it's weak? Are some of them weak and some of them not? Is it a tune problem? Is it an RPM problem? Is it a frequency problem? There's all kinds of things to look at to decide, first of all, whether or not that always happens. Because again, you see stuff on the internet where guys say, oh, yeah, I made 900 horsepower with this. Oh, that's great. Then finds out that's not actually a late model 5-liter block, but that's an early 302 block, but whatever. So it's easy to point to, and people want to say that because then it adds validity to their statement. Well, they're all like this. Well, they're not really all like that. And so I just want to see the data. And like I said, in my discussion with him, I'm not trying to disprove him. I'm not trying to prove him wrong. I have no vested interest in it being one way or the other. I just want somebody to provide data that says, here's what happened, and then here's why it happened. The other interesting thing in that conversation is that, and I get this from time to time, is people would send me questions and comments and all kinds of things, asking about what they should do with their combinations, what camshaft should I use, all of that stuff, which a lot of guys are here for that as well. But some guys I get, and this was the case with him, he wasn't asking my opinion so much as he was asking for me to tell him that he was doing the right thing. And that's perfectly fine. But in this case, what he wanted was, he said, okay, I'm going to get these injectors and I'm going to, put the highest flowing one in cylinder 7 and 8, and then that will cure all the problems. And that's what he wanted me to say. He just, the reasoning for him making the comments obviously had, I think for me, had less to do with whether or not that was factual than he wanted me to tell him, okay, look, that's the best thing to do. And maybe it is, if that's the case, if that's actually going to happen. But again, my question was, does it really happen? And also, you know, you don't need me to tell you that you're doing the right thing. If you're doing the right thing, you're doing the right thing. That's what the right thing. That's why they call it the right thing. So you can easily just do that. So, you know, and sometimes I have to weed through some of that stuff. Are you asking a question? Because sometimes what happens is people will say, well, what camshaft should I use? Okay, well, how much power are you trying to make? What's the application? What's the displacement? Do you want idle quality? Do you care about fuel mod? You know, we go through a few things, and then I can tell them, look, here's like 15 videos that you can look at and figure out how to make 400 horsepower, 500 horsepower, whatever from your 5.3. This will give you a bunch of stuff to choose from. And then I tell them a camshaft. Okay, here you can use the Truck Norris cam or the Tick cam or the Texas Speed cam or whatever it is. But then he comes back with, well, what about this cam? This is the cam I want to use. Well, why are we having this conversation then? Why didn't you just say, can I use this cam? And then I would have said yes. And then we wouldn't have had to go back and forth and spend all this time that both of us don't have a lot of. So if you're out there and you want to ask a question and you have a camshaft already, don't go through this like passive aggressive things. Just ask what you're going to ask and let's get to it, man. Okay, that's enough ranting and raving for me. But the very cool thing was the fact that these internet myths are very prevalent. Like we have talked before on the live feed and stuff. And I do want to test this. The throttle body spacers are another perfect example. We got guys on one side, oh yeah, they work. They definitely have power. And then guys on this side are like, that's just silly. There's no way that could work. And then guys in the middle, like, I want to test and see if it does that. I again, no vested interest on either side. I don't care. I just want to provide the information. I think that there might be some applications where spacers actually do something. And so I would like to see what those are. And so we can at least get the information out there and go, look, there's a lot of things where it's just an aluminum block that you're putting behind the throttle body and it does nothing because it can't do anything. All it's maybe changes the plenum volume a little bit, which Richard has shown in lots of testing. Doesn't make a big difference. If you do that and it changes atomization because you're blowing fuel through it, like with some of the throttle body injected stuff, maybe there's something there. And I would want to see that and be able to tell people, give them an honest, like data-filled explanation of why some of these work and why they don't, why they all don't work or why they all do work. Whatever it is, I would just want to have the data to kind of support that. So let's see what you guys got going on tonight. 7 and 8 are the last cylinders on the block closest to the output shaft where number 1 and 2 might have. Let's see. Okay, it seems like we've got some other stuff going on here. Let's see. Zach, I don't want to bring up an argument point. Nobody's going to argue here. Steam ports, early 4-corner vent versus later rear block off with the front 2 ports vented. I never run steam ports, so normally we have all of them just blocked off. Sometimes I have a crossover and then it has the T and then the exit part of it. And then we'll use that just to get air out of it and then cap it. But I've never run that line back to anything else when we run stuff on the Dyno. Now, we're only running fairly short runs, but maybe it would be better. But we've not blown up 7 and 8 when we do lots of testing. So that's why I don't understand why I'm not seeing, and maybe it's a heat thing. You know, there are lots of things to talk about there. I'm a fuel system design engineer. The flow rate in the fuel rail is too low. Is too low to cause the pressure to drop. Okay. Uh-oh, on the side of the road at the end of a trail of oil, shiny parts, I decided to leave my engine. Those are not good. Would anyone know if a reverse dome is better than a regular dome? A reverse dome is a dish piston, so you're going to change the compression if that's what you're asking. I figure it's a coolant flow. So we need to have a poll tonight. We didn't have a poll last night. So we need to have a poll. So I'm going to come up with a good poll idea. Mr. Holder, love the content. Is VP M5 methanol the be-all, end-all fuel for drag racing? Why or why not? I don't know. I've never run M5. I've never run methanol on anything, so I'm the wrong guy to ask. If the airflow in the intake manifold port is equalized, if they all flow the same amount, does that make fuel distribution equal? It can, as long as your fuel flow distribution is equal. But is it? Is your fuel rail, does it have the same pressure on all of them? Do all the injectors flow exactly the same? And the other thing to consider, and this is something that is in the design of the intake that actually has nothing to do with flow, because we can make two runners flow the same and have them be different lengths, and they will make power at different engine speeds. And so therefore they will need different fuel flow. We see this a lot on single plane manifolds. And you can see it on, if you did, I don't know why you would, but if you did an EFI manifold and the runners were different for different cylinders, and you did that, you could make them flow the same. So flow is not the whole thing. It's what kind of power they're producing in what RPM range. And then that's going to help dictate how much fuel you're going to need. Yeah, we're going to do a poll tonight. I was going to do something on that. Well, I'll figure something out. Reverse cooling is the best way to cool any engine from the top down and then forward. You want the coolest water to go in the hot part of the engine first. I agree. I would like to cool the heads before that, before the block. When I hydrolocked my LS3, it was number 7 rod that snapped. Is that the one that went first? It was all full of water. I've heard this too many times about peak timing occurring at peak torque. Well, you don't want peak timing at peak torque. You want peak timing at peak horsepower. Peak torque, you'd want much lower timing than that. This is interesting. The PCV sucks oil down the top of the intake, which if you take a look at the inside of an LS intake manifold, they're usually full of oil. The Hemis are like that too. Overnight, the oil runs down the intake port and accumulates behind the valve on the back cylinders. That's a good theory, except that with an intake design, with the LS intake design, there's no way the oil can find its way down the intake port, because the opening of the intake port is way above the floor of the intake manifold. JB, I'm glad you caught that, because I didn't want to bring that up. Richard, pretty sure you posted videos of intake testing that showed the air-fill ratio of each cylinder when we did 802s. I did that with NA and with nitrous, and we did it with a truck manifold, and then I've also done it with single plane manifolds. After watching those, it was clear to me that it's never always 7 and 8 that are lean. There was a big disparity in, I mean, it's like a scary amount. And that's the thing that people don't realize is, oh, well, on this fuel rail, I'm 1 psi lower at the end of the rail than I am at the beginning of the rail. That's great. But look at the distribution in the intake manifold. You have one cylinder that's 14-1, and the other one's 11-8, and they're getting the same amount of fuel. You should be worried about that a lot more than 1 psi of fuel pressure. Casey, is it true that the 049 RC motor will break the rod if you turn it 20,000 RPM? So 19,999 is okay? Do Windsor cams fit Cleveland blocks? No. Got a reverse cooled LT with 310,000 miles on it. Nice. Is there a diminished return on lower LSA cam numbers? How low do you go? Are you thinking that you're going to continue to add power if you drop down an LSA? The LSA is not the thing that you're doing. You're changing valve events, and that's what's going to change the power. It was my first experience pushing a nitrous button. Something went wrong, though. Did it not inject fuel also? What fuel do you run for your dyno test? It depends. I'm just posting. I was getting ready to post this before I went live. I have the results of the E303 versus the Summit E303 Plus. That video is getting posted right after I get off. And we ran all of that on 91. So almost every NA motor, including some really high compression stuff, we run on NA or we run on 91, the California premium gas. A lot of the blower stuff and turbo stuff now I run on E85 only because it's convenient for me. It's right down the street, and it's a lot less expensive than running race gas. When I'm doing things and I'm trying to demonstrate, how much power things are worth, I don't like limiting it with timing that I have to pull to run on pump gas, because then that doesn't show what things actually do. That doesn't show you if you have to pull a bunch of timing away because you're making too much cylinder pressure. That doesn't show what the thing does. You've limited yourself by putting pump gas in. That being said, I want to run more pump gas boosted testing. 500 horsepower NA LS1 is a 255 pump with stock regulator and 42-pound injectors. Enough. I think that the 42-pound injectors are more than enough. I'm not sure on the 255 though for 500 horsepower. With the repower you had from equal flowing ports in an intake manifold like an LS, I've seen people claim gains from this. The ideal situation is to have all of the cylinders producing the same power, the same curve in the same RPM range. That's optimized power, in my opinion. That being said, there are applications where guys want to have like a single plane intake where it's staggered, where they actually are producing, they're optimized to produce different power curves in different RPM ranges. So the cylinders, and they still do that. I mean, it still works. So if you look at a lot of the, a lot of drag race motors, a lot of cup motors, they used a lot of single plane manifolds that were not the same runner length on all of the cylinders. I think that the best way to do it would have them be all equal. I really enjoy the channel. Building a 2010 6-liter for street use Suburban BTR truck Norris cam, thinking about a 4-inch stroke. That would make it really torquey if you make it into a 408. Paul, thank you. I think we answered the question. A Windsor cam will not work on a Cleveland. The cams are different, and the gear drive for the distributor, all that's different. Yeah, we don't run the dyno very hot. You will not fill the block with coolant if you plug the steam ports. We do on the dyno. I find oil in the back cylinder head, intake runners, and behind the valves. Is it leaking out of the valve? Is it leaking out of the seal? From the, from the valve cover area down into the valve? Does the valve have oil on it? Kurt, a Windsor camshaft and a Cleveland cam can be interchanged. The gear drive for the distributor is completely different. They're different size. If you have a small block 400 and a 350, which one do you choose for a 78, 75 type of deal? Is the 400 really problematic? I don't know. I've never, other than the one that I did that was I don't even know if it was really a 400 block. It was just an aftermarket block, a 4125 bore aftermarket block. I've never actually done a 400. You recently posted videos of the big cubic inch LS stuff. Yes, we ran up to 495 inches. So I need to double check whether that Windsor camshaft fits a Cleveland. Okay, I will. What injectors and pumps do you run on the dyno? Well, we run a variety of different injectors depending on the power level, but the pump that we use is the EFI pump that we use is consistent, and the carbureted pump that we use is consistent too. We have a big, I think, a brushless aeromotive pump on the dyno that we use, and that's enough to support, I don't know, I'm sure it's enough to support 1,500 horsepower or something. So I'm trying to take a look and see here on the Ford stuff, because I didn't think that a Cleveland and a Windsor interchanged. So I'll have to take a look and see. So I'll take a look at that and see. Looking for pistons for 6.2 L92. Stock LS3 compression ratio would be nice. What brand or piston would you recommend? Oversized with stock. There's lots of good pistons out there. Wiseco has good stuff. JE. There's lots of good pistons out there. Moon tuned, is that? If I sleeve the stock block, what would fail next and at what horsepower level? I don't know. I don't know that even if you sleeve the block that's going to be the limit. I think that wouldn't the mains be the problem there? Most people don't run really high horsepower on stock blocks, even sleeve ones. They go to an aftermarket block, I think. How much is 91 going for in California? I think when I was coming back from West Tech, it was 4 or something. You recently posted videos of big cubic inch LSs. Would you boost or nitrous a long stroke LS? Yeah, we did run nitrous on the 495, and I think we ran it on the 465 also. Single pattern turbo cams typically have 116 LSA. That's a pretty big generality. The question was about camshafts. I don't think that a Cleveland cam is the same as a Windsor cam, but I'll take a look. Have you thought about trying a compound turbo setup and seeing what it does? Jack, you need to take a look at the compound turbo videos that are already up. We've already done that. Not only have we done turbo and turbo, we've done turbo and blower on a 3800 and then turbo and blower on a 4.6 4-valve Cobra. Getaway, odd question, 224, 232 cam, 115 LSA. Let's say go from 590 to 560, for instance. I don't know that it would change it that much. It would change it some, but I don't know what that is. Do you run a turnless or boost ref? It depends. It depends on how much power we're trying to run, and then how much injector we have to play with. If we have enough, sometimes we don't run a boost reference regulator. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we run a return system. The regulator has a return on it. So the regulator that's hooked up to the dyno has a return on it. But off of the regulator, we run a single line up to the rail, and then the rail that has a loop around to the other side of the rail. They're usually, big AN rails, although sometimes we just run the single line out to the factory rail. Like if I'm running a truck manifold and it has the factory truck rail on it, we just run it's a rubber line with an AN fitting on it that we just screw into that rail. I mean, into the regulator. I do plan on doing some boosted LTX stuff, 5.3 L83 specifically with the guys at Brian Tooley. The price of fuel depends on where you get it. It depends a lot on where you get it. It can vary dramatically. It can vary dramatically. I mean, it can vary by as much as 75 or 80 cents a gallon. Just me going to picking one gas station at the same stop when I stop. I usually go to either a Love's truck stop or a Pilot truck stop because those are the lowest price. But if you go to Chevron or Shell or one of the others that are around there, like I said, they could be 75 or 80 cents a gallon more, which is actually why I don't go there. Yeah, the big block Chevy cylinder head is a good example of them not flowing the same amount of air. And then obviously intake manifolds are like that as well. So Masako, I guess is how to pronounce that. Windsor and Cleveland cans can be interchanged, but you have to change the firing order. The thing that I was thinking was not the firing order. I thought that the distributor gear drive was completely different. Because when you go buy a distributor for a Cleveland, the distributor is different for a Cleveland than it is for a Windsor. I thought that meant the camshaft was different. What temperature you run the dyno at? Again, it just varies. It depends on what we're trying to do. Normally, that I would run it around 130 or 140 degrees, probably. You run aviation fuel? Is that the 100 octane leaded stuff? Can a 6.2 with Cathedral TFS 235 heads and a fast 102 and a 232 240 cam or 234 cam make 600? I don't think that cam's going to do it. At the 2015 Engine Masters contest, Sam could not fill their engine with coolant because they had the steam holes plugged. For Gen 2 LT1 with only unbaffled hood, ram air 52 millimeter throttle body, and 2.5 dual exhaust, the two options are 1.34 or 1.78 long tube headers. You don't need more than 1 3/4 inches on that motor. Sorry, Richard. I think you should try to triple check that. I will. I don't mind being wrong. I just have never thought that they were the same. I was just looking in the Comp Camps catalog to find out. Have you messed with decapped injectors? I have. I've run those in a Honda before, but when you do that, you'll never get them to flow the same if you just do 8 of them. You usually have to do a bunch and then flow test them all and get all the ones that flow the same because there could be big variances when you decap them. Can a small block Chevy 6-liter spool 278, 75 BS racing turbos without the aid of nitrous? Yeah, if you look at the Big Bang motor, that's what we ran. We ran 2 S475s, which is going to be a similar size. I don't know that it's going to be ideal, but that's what we ran on the Big Bang motor. Were there any 4-barrel size TBI systems, like from the factory? A 5-liter and a Windsor are the same. the 302 and the 351 will definitely take the same camshaft. Do you run returnless return systems regulated like Holley stuff or boost reference regulator? Like I said, we do sometimes and sometimes we don't. It doesn't matter as long as we can get the air fuel that we want, then that's all that we care about. It would be better to run it, especially if you're running really big fuel injectors. Sometimes it's a really good idea to boost reference it, because boost referencing does two things to you. One, it'll actually take fuel away under idle and stuff, because it will lower the fuel pressure, because vacuum works the reverse of boost does. So it will take fuel pressure away while you're driving around, and you have less than zero vacuum. So that will help you with tuning, especially on a big injector. And then it will add fuel pressure in relation to boost, so you'll always have the same delta. So that works out too. The thing that sometimes I don't like about it is that if you go up in fuel pressure under boost, you're making life harder on the fuel pump. So if we have enough injector, sometimes they don't go up in fuel pressure. And on our pump, we really don't need to worry about it. So I don't know why I'm not concerned with it. Sometimes we're just lazy and we don't want to hook it up, but it works either way. I have a 402 out of 70 Chevy CST 10. I'll let you build it, run some tests, and get some experience with that kind of engine. I have lots of experience with that kind of engine. Are you talking about a 400, or is it a 402 big block? I don't have a lot of experience with a stock 400, but lots with big blocks, though. Recipe for swap 454 carburetor for 500 or 600 horsepower. 600 horsepower from a 454 is a lot. That gets to be a pretty big camshaft and good cylinder heads and intake manifold and stuff, and fairly high RPM. When do you think you get back to the Magnum? I should be putting it back together pretty soon. Do you ever see the cold startup knock on your? I don't know what you mean. Does it make noise like my truck motor does? The pistons rattle before it reaches temperature, but we don't notice that on the engine dyno. The 2.2 is still being put together. Are you a Rotella fan? I'm not a fan of one specific kind of oil. I just put oil in it. It just says oil on the outside of it. You never buy gas right off the freeway. The truck stop fuel is the least expensive that I've seen when I take the trip, and I take the trip a lot. Yeah, we're glad you're here, man. I ain't no punk. I only run Chevron and fuel injected cars and trucks. I like mass airflow stuff. I especially liked it in the 5-liter Ford stuff. I thought that the drivability was better and stuff, but we hardly ever use, I can't remember, other than when we ran the L83 on the dyno, the 5.3 liter Gen 5 motor, we ran that with a mass air, but we eventually took it off because Eric wanted to figure out how to get around that and just run the thing speed density, mostly so that we could take all the air inlet stuff off and actually see that the throttle body was opening all the way and not resulting in countermeasures because it doesn't like what we're asking it to do. We wanted to make sure that during every run that we were getting wide open throttle. And the only way to do that was to make sure that the thing was running in speed density. And he figured out how to do that. And then once we could do that, we could even put the inlet system back on so that we could simulate what that was doing, just as from an airflow standpoint, but not from a fuel injection and timing and cam timing control standpoint. Is there a best break-in oil? No, there's lots of good break-in oils. High mileage engines suck oil down the intake manifold. Yeah, because you get blow by, and then because the way the PCV system is set up, they do draw oil vapor in, and it is bad because it's the detonation threshold is is worse when you have oil vapor in there. One, you can run the motor at whatever temperature you want. The thing makes the most power with high oil temperature but low water temperature. The thing is not going to get as good a gas mileage if you run it at low water temperatures. It will get much better gas mileage if you run at hotter temperatures, which is why all the OEMs have like 195-degree thermostat minimum, and why they're when they have primary and secondary fans that they kick on way late. So the hotter they can run that motor, the better fuel mileage they'll get. Hunter Tune says you got to throw out half the decapped injectors in the trash. That wouldn't surprise me. You have to go through quite a few of them before you get them all right. Oh, I'm sorry to hear about that, Punk. So if you have enough pump, the boost reference regulator is not needed. It's not bad. Actually, the having enough pump, the pump would be worse if you boost reference the regulator, because the fuel pressure goes up. The higher the fuel pressure, the harder it is for the pump. If you have enough injector, that makes it easier on the pump because you don't have enough. You don't have to run nearly as much pressure. Can you recommend an engine dyno simulation? I don't really use those very much, so I'm not fluent in that. I learned today that apparently there's a way to flow match injectors on the motor using a scan tool. Wow. Juan, I don't know if you have a Chevy 250, so the inline 6-cylinder is 40 over a small cam VS. You have a 7875 on a Chevy 250. That's a lot of turbo for that motor. I don't know what a cheap blow through setup is going to be. A carburetor, maybe you could go with the CS Racing one, or who's a Fuel Tech, or is that Quick Fuel? If you want low end torque, a turbo would be a lot better than a Pro Charger. You should come race lemons with us sometimes. That would be cool. I have done that before. That was a fun race. I did it up at Thunder Hill. Oh, 4.2 big blocks. I do like those. I'm building a 396 right now. At 220 degrees on some Mopar stuff. It wouldn't surprise me. I know that I remember driving when back when I was working for a Chevy magazine, GM gave us one of the Corvettes. I think it was an LT1 Corvette back then. And I remember driving and watching the secondary fan come on, and it didn't come on to like 235 degrees. I'm like, that's way too hot. To me, that's overheating already. Okay, the poll for tonight is going to be, I guess, gas prices, since we're talking about that. Will the war cause gas prices to go up? How about that? That'll be a simple one. There you go. So the question is, will the war that's going on, unfortunately, for all the terribleness that's going on over there, will that cause the gas prices to go up? Probably everywhere, not just for us, but everywhere around the world. The cylinders near the steam port run hotter. I believe it only pulled 1 degree. So it's changing timing on those cylinders. Yeah, that's good information. I love stuff like that. Is venting the atmosphere on a daily driver to keep oil out of the intake okay? I do that on all of my vehicles. Well, not this truck, not this stock one, but I probably should. But we do that on all the dyno motors. Durham, you were the first one to vote. Nice. Global futures have jumped. Of course, the gas price will reflect that. That's an interesting point, because a lot of people don't realize that the price of gas has nothing to do with what a lot of people think it has to do with, and it's almost 100% supply and demand. Motorcycles are a great alternative for fuel economy. I would like to actually have a little scooter, not because I would drive it around to save fuel so much, as because I like to drive them out and run along the roads, especially as we're getting into better temperature now. And that's where you find snakes, is they're laying out on the road at night because they're getting some of the warmth from the black road. Let's see, you have an LS3. How much power would you lose going to 9-to-1 compression like an LS9? So what is that thing to begin with? You're going to lose about 3 to 4% in power per full point of compression. So you can do the math on that. I don't remember what the LS3 is. Is it 11-to-1? Have you gotten down 2 full points? Or is it not quite 11-to-1? It's like 10-8 or something. Stock 355 with 882 heads. What recommendations do you have for using those heads to make more power? It has 10,000 miles on it. That's not really very much. The 882 heads are not great. You can port them, and I actually have a video up where we ran some ported ones. We did those and did a mild camshaft on it, like an RV style cam and a dual plane intake and stuff, and they worked okay. They're not as good as any kind of aftermarket head that you put on them, but you can do all the normal things: a camshaft, springs, a good intake manifold, small carburetor, long tube headers. You can do boost. That's an interesting point. Will the war be used as an excuse for higher gas prices? Absolutely. Should they go up due to it? That's a different story. Everything is an excuse to do that, it seems like. Mopeds are fun, easy. Cruise, getting cold snacks at the store, wearing flip-flops and shorts. What I want is I would like an old Honda Trail 90 or a Honda Spree would be cool, something like that. And Mike's right. If you get rid of the 882s and put Vortex on it, you'll be a lot happier. I'm not worried if somebody sees me on a moped. Yeah, an old Trail 90 is really nice. Yeah, they're not cheap. That's why they're cool, though. All cool things are going to cost money. Will an 1 5/8 primary tube header work okay with an 88 millimeter eBay turbo? Yes. Any advice for a 306 cylinder Ford with boost? Yeah, it's going to work good. You just have to make sure that you have a decent intake manifold on it. I wouldn't worry too much about the exhaust. Just get the exhaust to the turbo. They have cams for those, and they have ported. You can port the head. 94 miles an hour in a Vespa. That's really getting with the program. I remember changing the sprocket on my CL100 when I took it with me down to Southern California when I moved down there to go to college, and I would change the sprocket on it so that we could ride it on the freeway so that it would go fast enough. Boosted 87 octane, boosted LS 87 octane tuning. I'm not too interested in that. Although I guess we probably would be more interested in that now. I think if you take enough timing out of it, it probably can work. A GT45 would be okay for a 300. I don't know how much power you're trying to make. I think I would go down to a GT35 probably on a 300. Be stealth and get an electric scooter. The problem I have with electric scooters is I'm going to be driving I might be driving like 40 or 50 miles when I go out and do this. And I just don't want it to not work. I don't want it to run out of juice. I don't know what the range is on those anyways. 60-mile-an-hour Segway. I actually have a hoverboard, but that's not fast enough, and it's not far enough, and it's a bit of work to ride too. I rode it all around. I use it down at West Tech, especially when I go to clean up at night, because then or even during the day, whenever it is. But by the time I've done all the testing that I've done, there's just stuff everywhere, and so now I've spent the last 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 days or whatever grabbing stuff from everywhere, and now I got to go put all that back. So having the hoverboard allows me to zip around and put all the stuff back where it goes. Is Buick Regal engine different internally than a Grand National engine? No, the like a Regal T-Type is the same as a Grand National, if that's what you're asking. Ego Boost Turbo on a Honda Ruckus. I picked up a 70s CT90. Oh, that's nice. Those are cool. It never rains in Southern California, it pours. I did a video of riding the hoverboard, because I rode the hoverboard all around the MPMC conference too. And I tried to ride it in SEMA, and I got like tackled at the door, and they were not having any of it. And I did a video while I was riding it around of I did like a shop tour of West Tech from the hoverboard. I tried to I think we have a video of me doing the hoverboard on the chassis dyno also, but I was holding onto a chair because I'm not talented enough to just run it on the chassis dyno, because wheels on top of wheels and the hoverboard and all that. That's a recipe for me eating it. Have you ever messed with an liquid propane gas drag car? I have not. Why do Y blocks sound so cool? They do, and West Tech ran a couple of really cool Y blocks the other day. Yeah, the 2-speed stuff punk is pretty cool. Those are nice. I really like those old bikes. Gen 4 LS, 58X, and a 4X cam. Yep. Unless it's an LS2, then it can be a hybrid. How much power did the hoverboard make? I don't think it I think we could have burned up the motor by trying to spin that roller. Why do a lot of high horsepower, 1,000 horsepower plus turbo LS guys use aftermarket cathedral port heads and not aftermarket rec port heads? The cathedral port heads tend to be more responsive, so they make more low speed power usually than the rec port heads do. One of the Barra engines that I have now in my storage had the LPG conversion on it. GM Z34 double overhead cam 3400, the twin dual cam. I've done those. I haven't done a boosted one though, but we did some stuff to them. Have you ever rode a Gophed scooter? I have, and we also put a pipe on my. I have a Gophed. I have one here still, and we put a pipe on it, and it made a big difference. It's really loud, but it made. I think it picked up when we did, because we did a test. I was telling people about on one of the live feeds before. I did a test for Splash Magazine that allowed me to get a free Gophed, which was awesome. And so we did a back-to-back test, and we wanted to do a top speed test, but we didn't have a radar gun at the time. So what we did was we took an inductive pickup like on a fluke meter, and then did some like, full top speed stuff on the Gophed, and we just monitored and data logged the peak engine speed. So we picked up about 700 RPM with a pipe. It was pretty cool, and you could feel it. It was a lot sportier. Are you planning on doing any videos in the future on the LT1 L86 GM motors? Yeah, I have done some on the with Brian Tooley, and he has a couple out there that we can do some more testing on. Grease pit. I don't remember which motor you're talking about. If I put boost to it, what power level would it break? I don't know what motor that was. Does anybody know what the Burnell hardness is on a 6-liter block? I do not know that. Have you dynoed any 300 Fords? I have not done a 300 inline 6-cylinder Ford. I've never owned one of those. The factory Gen 3 intake on the flow bench is a mess, I would imagine. The 2JZ propane Rambler. Yeah, that was neat. I need to go back out and see that. Those guys are really, they're good people. Do you plan on testing on a Dodge Stealth Twin Turbo? I have done chassis dyno stuff on those, and we've done turbo upgrades and intercooler upgrades, and I think back then we were doing like HKS stuff, but I haven't seen one of those in a long time. 2 more minutes. What engine has impressed you the most out of everything that you've tested? I think the one I was most surprised with was the first Big Bang motor, because we had no idea that it was going to go up to what it went up to, and stay alive. It was amazing. Promax does have a head. Do they have? Oh, so they have a CNC head. I thought that they just had a replacement head for the 300 with larger valves. And I've worked with those guys before. That would be interesting. You should do a turbo CT90. Yeah, that would be good. I have a 2000 4.8 Pro Charge on my torque management is 100% after 2800. I'm the wrong guy to ask about that. I don't even know what that is on your factory ECU, because I don't ever tune with any of that. Flow bench, the Gen 3 versus Gen 4 intake with good heads, and then on the dyno. I don't need to run a flow bench test on them, because I've run the truck versus the Trailblazer SS intake manifold like 20 times, so we know what they do. And what they're going to show is not going to be based on the flow rate. It's going to be a change of intake design, I think. What is the record for a boosted LS6? An LS6 big block or an LS6 LS based motor? And is it a stock bottom end? And I don't know what you're talking about. What's your favorite engine oil brand without being biased? I don't have one. I don't have favorite engine oil brands. I don't have favorite engines. I don't have any of that stuff. For me, we just put oil in. I've run Redline stuff for a long time. I've run the Lucas stuff for a long time. I've run way back in the day. I ran Mobile One. No, not Mobile One. We've run that and stuff. The Arco Graphite way back in the day. I don't recommend that. They don't even make that. I haven't made that for years. But when they put junkyard motors together, I just put new oil in it, and we just put the right kind of weight in it. Usually it's 530 in most things. I've run the Promax heads, and they've worked pretty well. We ran their big block heads. I've run their small block Ford heads, and I think that those are the only ones. The Sears oil. I don't think I've run Singer sewing machine oil in a car yet, though. Your atmosphere. We had good atmosphere tonight, Dean. Is it true BTR stage 2, I don't know, /A LS3 makes 470 to the tires? I don't know what that question is. Still dreaming of a turbo 200, 250 Ford stuffed into a Chevette with a 5-speed. Anything in a Chevette would be good, right? Ooh, see, you win. Fuel price in Norway is $8.40 a gallon. Wow. Okay, guys, I really got to get going. Thank you guys all for showing up. And we got to check first before I leave. We got to check our poll. And not surprisingly, will this cause the gas prices to go up? And 94% said yes, which we kind of expected. Again, thank you guys all for showing up. I'm going to post right after I get off here. I'm going to post the video on the 5-liter Ford Summit E303 versus the E303 Plus versus the E303 Cam. So that's going up right after this. Thank you guys for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow.